He's from Barco. He's actually a recent employee of Barco. He was a laser light engineer for many, many years. He came to Display Summit for many years, which was called Projection Summit at the time. Saying lasers, lasers, lasers. Well, lasers are here. So this is a good thing. Rich McPherson is with NEC, also a long-time employee of the company. And they focus across a whole range, of course, of projection products, but he's responsible for the cinema products. Michael Karagosian was a consultant in the industry and very, very well known in the cinema industry, and provides consulting services and analysis of various issues affecting the whole cinema industry. And actually one of the things I want to talk to Michael about is this digital 2.0 cinema issue, which we'll come back and talk to a little bit later. And then Don Shaw with Christie, of course. Chris, the three horses of the display projectors providers are here, and Don represents the third horse here, also focused on the cinema space. All long-time experts in this area. This is actually kind of a repeat of a panel we did last year, so we're gonna keep marching on. It's a year later. So, and it's pardon me for my voice. I'll have to try and muddle through this. So I'm going to ask a very quick question. I'll let you guys talk. How's that? Okay, so Mike, let me start with you. You brought a slide that kind of talked about the state of the digital cinema industry. And Ricky, if I can ask you to pull that slide up, it was a chart that's showing the sales in the US and in China, as I recall. Yeah, 3D. So maybe if you can talk about, this is the general question about the state of the cinema industry.
Well, actually, this chart shows the 3D industry.
The 3D part, yeah.
This isn't showing the full industry, but I wanted to show in this chart that 3D has a worldwide footprint, and that there's quite a bit of business actually in 3D outside of the U.S. We hear a lot of the U.S. about 3D not being a big money maker, or that the boom is over, which is true. We had a very big surge of 3D, interest in 3D, and market in 3D over the last few years, and that's tapered down. There's numerous reasons why. And that will, those things will change over time. 3D is not going away, and I think what the purpose of this chart is really just to show that that's still alive. It will stay alive. I don't believe it's going away because the creative community doesn't want it to go away, and that's actually why you're going to hear it from these my fellow panelists here. You're going to hear their products that actually have focus towards 3D.
So what do the rest of you think about the 3D trend at this point? Is it up, down, sideways, regional?
Well, it's just from the chart and the numbers, it is a little bit regional, but I'll point out the recent opening weekend for Jurassic World was heavily supported by 3D. I don't recall the exact percentage, but a substantial amount of the box office was generated by 3D presentations. So I'd say, from Barco's perspective, we believe it's still a very, very important part of differentiating cinema, and not surprisingly, laser is a very important part of making 3D the premium experience that it was intended to be.
Actually, I think from the standpoint of looking at the laser side of things, that's once there's enough projection out there, enough laser systems that are in the field, as well as to create the 3D in a brightness standpoint that people can really enjoy the theater experience from a 3D standpoint, then I think we'll start seeing a little bit more of an uptick as far as the usage of 3D in the theaters more. So I think that's, right now with lamp-based systems, we all know that there is a limitation as far as the brightness goes, and that kind of deters some customers. So once there's more lasers available, a bigger market than that, that'll change things, I think.
Do you think that's really true? Can there be a revival of 3D interest in the US with brighter 3D?
I think there could be. I think once they see it in that format, when you're getting 14-foot lampers, that'll make a big difference. So I do believe that it will bring it back up a little bit.
I agree. I mean, Michael's chart doesn't show the trend here and what's been happening with 3D. And it's been on a steady decline in most mature markets. It's because the novelty's worn off. And quite frankly, exhibitors aren't showing it bright enough on screen. Going to a film, I saw one on Sunday. I went to Jurassic World, saw it in 3D with my kids. Film was okay, but it was too dark. I couldn't see anything except other than in the middle of the screen. So this is something that we as an industry need to address. I once made a presentation that you know, the industry is killing the goose that laid the golden egg, because 3D is that one thing that allows exhibitors to really have a true upcharge on the ticket price. If you go in there and you show them a product at that kind of low quality level, people are going to feel ripped off. They're not going to want to come back and pay an extra $4 or $5 to see a film in 3D. And that's what's happening.
I'll take that one step further with some positive validation. Rich is absolutely correct that we need, you know, before we can move the needle on 3D as a general category, there obviously has to be a much larger installed base so that we take the premium experience and move it out into mainstream cinema. But I'd say a dozen or so of our laser installations around the world that were specifically installed to put 3D on a much larger screening, the outcome is basically more patrons per show, and there's already an upcharge for 3D in most cases, and in some cases an upcharge for laser and 3D. So there's early existence proof that you can put more people in seats and with sufficient marketing have a higher price for the laser 3D ticket, and that's paying off the investment. So by extension, that could occur in a greater percentage of theaters as we get brighter 3D. As Don says, that's key for the format.
I think that was an important point, that box office is a big driver here. The upcharge, 3D is probably the only area that exhibitors have successfully been able to maintain an upcharge. They can't do it with sound. I don't really know if they've been able to do it with laser projection, but they can certainly portray it as a PLF, but just advertising, I have a laser projector, and saying, come and pay an extra couple bucks, I haven't seen that yet, and I'm not sure the audience would respond to that. So it'll be marketed differently. It'll be marketed in the PLF, premium large format type brand, such as AMC has Prime, and you see other type brands like this around. But 3D particularly is sold as an upcharge. So the exhibition industry doesn't really want it to go away. The distribution industry doesn't want it to go away. Filmmakers like creating in it. So I don't see 3D going away. I do see 3D needs improvement, and I think that's what we just heard, is that shooting for brighter 3D is a big drive. I have been working very closely with the ASC in the last year, and that's all I hear, is we want high brightness 3D. We want 14-foot Lambert 3Ds.
These are standardized.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because there is a standard for 14-foot Lambert brightness today in cinema, but that is not advocated for 3D, although it could be. The challenge, I have another slide actually so this actually brings up, there's another slide, very colorful, showing why it's hard to get the 14-foot Lamberts.
I think it's at the end of the deck, Ricky.
I think it's at the end of the deck, or almost at the end. Sorry guys, to take over with my slides, but you have yours. 14-foot Lamberts is a goal, and 14-foot Lamberts should be achieved wherever it can be achieved. And what you hear about from manufacturers of laser projectors is that is possible with the large amount of lumens that can be delivered from a laser projector. In particular, with the 6 primary projector, you can get a more efficient technology in place to deliver 3D to the eyes. Now, there's other technologies that have been introduced as well that can...
Here's your slide.
There we go. So there's other technologies that have been introduced as well that can also lead to higher brightness 3D. Not 14-foot lamberts in every case, but we can get to a continuum of higher brightness. Today, we have typically a maximum of 6-foot Lambert 3D in cinemas, and that's the maximum you generally see. So you're seeing in a lot of cinemas lower light than that. So it's considerably lower than the 14-foot Lambert 2D. And what this leads to is a feeling, it works in the novelty stage, it doesn't work when you're trying to create a long-term format. We're somewhat stuck with this 6-foot Lambert for a couple of reasons. We've been stuck with it. What this chart shows is the size of screen on the bottom and the amount of lumens that it takes to get to 14-foot Lambert. So the colors represent what you see with different laser projectors actually out on the market. So the next step that we will get to is delivering content that can that can be shown at higher foot Lamberts. And that's what we don't have in the field yet. We don't have that out in exhibition. If you are an exhibitor and you install a screen that's even if it's capable of 10-foot Lambert 3D, and you go to order your 3D movie, you're going to get 6-foot Lambert color.
I think there's one exception to that. I think Fox has a 14-foot Lambert version of every film, every 3D film they do. They put a 14-foot Lambert version.
Really?
And there are a few theaters that are capable of showing it now, right?
Absolutely.
Has anyone done any exit polls or surveys to see if there's a difference in perception?
There,
Not yet.
Christie showed the Hobbit clips at 14-foot Lambert last year.
I mean, we've been sort of beating that drum at most trade shows and laser
Yeah,
demos.
it's amazing.
The response is always phenomenal, but we've not done a formal audience exit poll at a theater to address the question. But everyone who's seen 14-foot Lambert 3D, they never want to go back to whatever they're seeing in movie theaters.
It's true. We don't have an exit poll on HDR either, but you won't find any shortage of attention for that.
No, but 3D's got a problem, especially in the U.S. So maybe you should put together some quantitative data here for marketing purposes to try and get people back in the theaters.
With all due respect, you put too much emphasis on polling. Again, perception is learned. You need expert watchers showing other people. You can't take a Joe Blow from out the street and expose it.
Joe Blow from the street is the guy who pays for the ticket.
But Peter, I agree with you, but on the other hand, you can also have the reverse problem where the experts and pioneering cinema watchers get to see 3D at 14-foot Lamberts, and then they said, I was in New York for a couple conferences last week, and it's all like, well, where can I see laser at 14-foot Lamberts? We're not ready yet, and that's to Rich's point. The studios aren't going to grade content, or not all the studios are going to grade content at 14-foot Lamberts until there's a big enough installed base. So we're back a little bit chicken and the egg, but you're right. We have to populate major metropolitan areas with good laser projectors so that both the golden eyes and the normal public and the press can go see it. And then it'll pull, just like HDTV, it'll pull the rest of the viewing public in. That's
I don't want to position laser as just the only way to get to high brightness 3D. We can certainly get to higher brightness 3D with current technologies. Lasers probably has a lot of other advantages. So but I just want to point out that in my experience, I've not seen a shortage of interest in buying technologies that lead to higher brightness 3D. Well, we have certain challenges in the U.S. because we have an older installed base. but I'm looking at sales around the world, and I'm seeing installations that are shooting for 9-foot Lambert, 10-foot Lambert, higher numbers than what we can get today.
But also the colors are better on laser, on a DCP file.
Well, is P3 different in laser than in?
Well, at least on 6P projections, very, very different.
I
yeah.
think there's the only projector I've seen that has better contrast, where I see a really huge difference, is the Dolby Vision projector.
Okay, that's the gold standard. No. Any
That's the only
6P,
one
any
where I've really
6P,
seen something stand out that told me that laser was.
Jurassic Park trailer, Jurassic World trailer, amazing. I saw it on the Cinemacanica Barco base, amazing. 80% of the experience of Dolby Vision. The color.
Well, the color's the same whether it's xenon or laser. It's
No,
all DC.
no, you're wrong.
No.
Not in reality.
Respectfully,
I mean, the laser's capable of wider color gamut, but if it's DCI
I
compliant,
guess,
doesn't it have to be P3?
our audience feedback, not statistically valid, but our audience and exhibitor feedback, people that have installed lasers so far, is that, and we have two cases. We have one set of exhibitors that go to a lot of trouble to promote the fact that it's laser and it's new and it's different, and they have a whole marketing program around it. That's one case. Another case where they just plug it in and install it, and in both cases they have a positive response to color saturation,
Fantastic. You have no
brightness,
idea.
uniformity. There's a lot of details in why laser is better, technical details, which I'm sure we'll get into later, that explain why, but the audience doesn't need to be told that xenon, average xenon projection and laser projection is different.
Blue push is a different story.
Blue pump phosphor,
That's lesser than xenon.
I'm referring to RGB premium
but,
lasers.
but at the same luminance though, I mean, they're mastered to the same color space.
Well, the first-
and if they're the same luminance.
Okay, we'll get into it. The first difference is with a xenon projector at the same foot Lamberts in the center, okay, you can have 75% in the corners and still be in spec. With the laser projector, you can have 95% in the corners.
Okay.
That's a huge difference. The amount of screen gain you need, how that uniformity of brightness and color across the whole frame interacts with high gain screens. Because if you've got a xenon projector with 75% of the corners and a high gain screen together, first of all, you lose all the seats on the sides, and it's
A hotspot.
not as good. You got a hotspot, it's not as good an experience. So that's one of the technical reasons why people, but to come back to color for a minute, because of the saturation of laser,
It's
the
just
XY point may be the same. In other words, when you put the meter on the xenon screen versus the laser screen, the XY point may be the same, but to the audience, the laser colors are different, better.
More lifelike.
Okay.
And we should get statistical analysis on that.
You other guys agree with that?
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I think that the colors are going to measure the same, as Bill said, but there's also some other effects. I mean, you could have some metameric failure with some viewers. I mean, people perceive colors differently from xenon lamps and lasers. I think that's well known. But to say that one is better than another, sure, the laser colors you can make more saturated colors, especially reds. They really pop out at you when you see a laser red. But better, worse, I think it's about the creative intent. And when a filmmaker masters his film,
Yeah, go back to black and white then.
is color better than black and white? You know, it comes back to the filmmaker's intent and how they wanted that film to be seen. So I can't say for sure that laser is better than xenon in terms of the color, but it's
Well,
certainly capable of a wider color gamut in technical terms.
I think
I bet the farm-
product that's about to come out on the market is that I think shows this off best, except you probably won't get to see it. There's not very many Dolby Vision projectors around. Is Inside Out.
I saw Inside Out at CinemaCon.
The CinemaCon.
Yeah.
So the colors on that are spectacular.
Yeah, but Tomorrowland
But
with
you're
actual
also
film
looking at
was
a very
better.
You're also looking at a very high contrast projector. So I think one of the things we don't talk about, I'm siding more with Don. What I would expect is reds to look better because we have well, the red filter and the in xenon to deal with. I would expect reds to look better on laser. I would, but I would also, what I see that's possible with the projector, Dolby Vision is the gold standard, but we have a higher contrast projector. I would really like to see us move towards higher contrast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree, Michael, that the sort of the one dimension upon which all the studios and creatives pretty much agree is a higher contrast level. And I think for the audience's benefit, we have to break that discussion down into higher contrast between peak luminance, peak brightness, and black level, and do we increase the peak luminance above what it currently is. Now, in the first case, contrast level, we're back to how are the studios going to master movies?
No. That's the incorrect way to look at it. You give studios a 1,000 to 1 contrast ratio projector, and they're going to master for a 1,000 to 1 contrast ratio projector. You give them a 10,000 to 1 contrast ratio projector, you're going to get a 10,000 to 1 contrast ratio.
Let me clarify my point a little bit. If you give the studios an installed base of 10 or 20,000, 10,000 to 1 high contrast ratio projectors, they'll do the new pass. If you give them an installed base of 20 Dolby Vision projectors, they'll ask Dolby to pay for that pass. So,
but it'll get done.
It'll get done. So again, let me just go back to the sort of the separation of contrast ratio from peak brightness, because they're two different elements of high dynamic range, and one of them has a humongous cost impact, which is pretty obvious to see. If you double the peak brightness required for a given version, let's say, you got to double the laser power that's going in the back end. So even before we talk about high contrast ratio. So in the case of IMAX, IMAX has used the high brightness of laser to do bigger screens. In the case of Dolby, they've used it to do higher peak brightness that's used in highlights and portions of the content. So I just want to make sure everybody understands, yes, you can do higher peak brightness, but it comes at a cost. And then when you add in 3D, to go higher peak brightness and 3D, you just need a tremendous amount of laser power to get to a medium-sized screen, and that's expensive.
And there's a potential for fatigue in the extreme high end of Dolby Vision, for sure.
So let's position.
Maybe you overbuilt. It's one you may find.
We just jumbled 3 different projector technologies, and so IMAX's projector, IMAX always shows it around 22-foot Lamberts, that's their peak, which has always been higher than 2D. In 2D. It's true. And so their laser projector, which is the old Kodak projector, the Kodak laser projector, is no different. What they were able to bring with the laser projector is higher contrast. So they're showing at their typical 22-foot peak light level with a higher contrast.
How much?
Somewhere around 8,001 to 2001.
The native.
It's a nice, very nice looking projector. If you were in LA and you were able to have that opportunity to see
But
it.
you need screen shakers.
So, I don't know what they're doing. I mean,
No, they removed the prism, and now you need a lot of screen shaking.
I mean, anyone who's using a silver screen needs to shake it.
maybe you need to shake the prism.
I beg to differ.
We've tried shaking everything, and the speckle doesn't go away. Shake the viewer, maybe.
So there's the IMAX laser projector. There's the Dolby Vision laser projector, which we just talked about, which is double, goes up to 48-foot Lambert, something like that.
1,000,000 to 1.
No, excuse.
1,000,000 to 1 contrast.
28-foot Lamberts.
Well, it depends on the screen size. I mean, it's a scalable system, so they
I
can
see.
put however many lasers they need for a specific screen.
Up to what lumen value?
The Dolby system? I'm not at liberty to say.
Hi.
Extremely high.
So we're talking about three different projector systems. The Xenon projector is the one that is typically mastered to today. There isn't, that's because laser projectors are brand new. So in terms of what people choose to create though, in terms of content, there's actually an interesting analogy that's going on right now between Tomorrowland and Jurassic Park. Each were in different aspect ratios than the standard flat and scope aspect ratios that cinemas around the world have been designed for. And so there's huge amount of talk, chatter been going on certain reflectors in the last week, last few days actually, all about what pain it is to deal with this different aspect ratio. But that pain did not stop the filmmaker creating that aspect ratio and putting it out there. That's what they wanted to do. And it's not a studio decision. So we talk about studios do this and studios do that. Studios distribute movies as the filmmakers tell them that they're going to distribute it. So if the filmmaker wants to do a movie in a higher contrast, they're going to do it. That's the way it's going to be. The studio's going to distribute it.
Well, don't you think with more and more movies are going to be shot in HDR because there's an emergent consumer market. And if we don't have a theatrical solution that can do HDR economically and deployed in a mass market, that's going to create a problem.
The IMB. Use the IMB as a Trojan horse.
You're talking about the content pipeline problem? Yeah, the workflow is got lots of problems.
Not just
No.
the pipeline, I'm talking about theatrical projection solution, HDR solution. That because if I can get it in my home on my HDR TV, why can't I get it in the theater?
You'll expect more.
Of course.
Maybe they'll distribute it in UHD Blu-ray, and
It will.
maybe it looks good.
That's right.
This is an interesting
To the
question.
cinema.
I mean, my U.S. sales director came to me a few weeks ago and said, Don, this Dolby Vision thing is great, but what about HDR for the great unwashed?
That's the point.
How are we going to
That's
roll
what
this
I'm here
out
for.
to every movie theater? Because people are going to start to expect it in movie theaters because they can get it. You can get a Vizio TV
That's the point.
with HDR capabilities. I mean,
And you're leaving the projection guys out in the lurch, which is not fair.
Since we all represent companies that have sold a ton of Xenon-based projectors and the overwhelming installed base is still Xenon projectors, can we all agree that the foundation for any HDR, DCI 2.0 or what have you, for mainstream cinema, albeit premium mainstream cinema, has to be laser? 'Cause
Yes,
if
absolutely.
If you could do 10,001 with Xenon, we'd be doing it, right? If
Absolutely.
we could do wider color gamut with Xenon, we'd be doing it. So I think the takeaway here is whatever Hollywood and the consensus ends up being, and your point is valid, Chris, studios are all in on high dynamic range for TV. So they're going to look for a solution, but not for 0.1% of the screens around the world. They're going to look for a solution that will proliferate over time across the entire cinema market. And to do those things practically, a laser light source is
It's indispensable. Indispensable.
So I think that's the
no,
key takeaway.
don't waste
in terms
your
of
time.
This audience is, yes, there's going to be a better format, and it'll have different contrast ratio and different color gamut and different frame rates and so forth. And we'll argue about that for the next couple of years. And all the theater owners will raise their hand and say, but we got to pay for this too. And we'll come to a compromise and get to the next level. And in my humble opinion, same as it was 10 years ago, it'll be laser based.
You're right.
All right, well, that may be the case. In the short term, that means if anyone wants an HDR theatrical solution, you have to go to Dolby, you have to go to IMAX, period.
Or get a UHD Blu-ray.
Well, that's a home solution. We're talking
Well,
about
no, it may be a solution.
No, because the projection equipment has to be able to support that.
Well, and
That's his point, so-
I could do it myself with $50,000. There's a board, there's a device working over there that can go into an IMB. Simple as